Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, in this business, you learn something new every day, and if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with, once more, as always. My name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things, we'd love it if you'd subscribe to the podcast. You may have already, but if you haven't, you can find us over at Amazon, Spotify, Apple, Google, basically wherever you get your podcasts. And plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we'd really appreciate it. Also, you can follow us on social media, either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And finally, and it's probably the most important thing, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large, because it's what we love to write about and talk about, and we love it when you come and read about it, so please stop on by. This episode is yet another one in the continuing series of I'm a Little Late and Behind the Eight Ball, but apologies to all. It doesn't necessarily mean anything because the movie is doing its festival run now, and it's an important one as well. It's called Last of the Right Whales, and it's based on a group of people who are united in their cause to save the North Atlantic right whale. And I did not even know there was a North Atlantic right whale, but it's in danger, and it's really an interesting story. And just as we see these people unite for the common good, and it's a fantastic film. And we had the unique pleasure of sitting down and talking with director Nadine Pequeneza. I apologize if I butchered that. Just about sort of the origins of the film and putting it together and really following this amazing story of the right whale who, quite frankly, needs our help. But I hope you enjoy our talk with Nadine, and check out Last of the Right Whales when you get a chance, as it is doing its festival run right now, and I'm sure we'll end up either in a theatrical or VOD run at some point. But enjoy our talk with Nadine, and enjoy and check out Last of the Right Whales, and it'll make you think. It really will. Now, I mean, obviously, I watched the film, and I mean, I was so struck by it. I mean, congratulations on it. And I mean, I guess my first question is, I mean, I didn't know that specifically for this, I guess, species of whale, it was this dire. I mean, can you walk me through just how you discovered sort of this story, or how you got involved in this story?
Yeah, well, I think I might be a little bit like yourself. I saw headlines in 2017 because there was a mortality event, an unusual mortality event is what scientists and government was calling it, because 17 whales died of this species, the North Atlantic right whale, in a matter of months, really, over the summer. Most of them perished, and it was because they were coming further north outside of their usual habitat into the Gulf of St. Lawrence looking for food. And it's such a heavily trafficked and fished area that there weren't the protection measures in place that are necessary. So ships weren't looking out for them. Fishing gear was being put in the water, fixed fishing gear that is hazardous for them. And that happened. And so that's what grabbed my attention. And I became aware of the situation because of that.
No, I mean, when you're diving into something like this, my camera's slipping, sorry about that. When you're diving into something like this, I can imagine you're trying to find sort of the through line and like trying to figure out where the narrative is. And I mean, in watching it, I love how you're very much focused on the people, sort of the real people who are passionate about these whales. And I mean, I'm kind of curious, as you're diving into the subject, like, what are the things that really kind of surprised you as you sort of got more and more involved?
You're right. Finding a through line is always what you want to do as a storyteller. And because these whales, their habitat is all the way from Florida to the North Atlantic, in a way, I wanted the whales to be the through line. And so you do see the mom calf pair that we follow over the course of 2 years. Her name's Snow Cone, and she had her first calf in 2020. It's really them and the people's connection to them as they move through the range, through their migration. And so the people's connection to these whales in particular, but also other individuals that were spotted, I think is what engages people in the story. And so the individuals that you talked about, there's a fisherman, a snow crab fisherman from the Gulf of St. Lawrence. There's a wildlife photographer also situated in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. But then there are people who are working with the calves, Barb Zutzma and her team, Tom and Katie down in Florida. And then in Cape Cod, there's Stormy Mayo, who's an ecologist who's been working with right whales for a long time. And so these people in each of their areas have a particular connection and perspective on the whale, and they all work in very close proximity. So these are critically endangered animals, and by law, you can't get within 100 meters of them in Canada and in the States within 500 yards. So just being able to tell the story and to have visuals of the whale, you need to be working with and connected to people who have that kind of access. And so it's through their eyes and perspectives that you're seeing the whale and get to know these whale characters that I spoke about.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. And I mean, I think something that you did, and which is really makes it that much more effective, is putting us on the boat with these people and putting us on the boat with these entanglement crews, and really stressing the fact that this isn't, a question of, rainbows and sunshine, and we're saving the whales. It's like, this can be pretty dangerous work. And I mean, how important was it for you to show just really, in many instances, like particularly these entanglement crews are putting their lives on the line by even getting within sort of even that minimum mandated distance to help these whales?
Yeah, well, because they have special federal permits, they're allowed to approach within meters of these whales. And certainly these disentanglement teams that you talk about, they get very close, like close enough to touch these whales sometimes. Of course, that's not their objective. Their objective is to cut them free of the rope that they've become entangled in. But you're right, it is very dangerous. And someone lost a disentanglement person from the Campobello whale team, Joe Howlett. I don't know if you saw this story, but he lost his life in 2017 in a rescue operation in Eastern Canada. And so it is very dangerous. A lot of the people on these disentanglement teams, it's volunteer work, and a lot of them are fishermen. And so they recognize the problem. They want to try and help solve it. This doesn't solve the problem, but it at least alleviates the immediate suffering that these whales are undergoing. And so there are a lot of teams that are composed of fishermen.
Now, I mean, during this entire process, I've got to imagine, however long it took, I've got to imagine you were embedded with these crews off and on for at least, 2, 3, 4 years. But I'm kind of curious, is there anything in the process that you learned that maybe surprised you just about sort of the work that these people do?
I guess what surprised me is how connected they are to the individual whales. When I first started talking to them on the phone, before I got out on the boats and before I became embedded, over 3 years we shot, but it was really 2 years more intensively. And after spending some time with these whales, I understood the connection, because they are very individual in the way that they behave. I mean, they know all of their genetics. They know they have preferred spots, some of them in the ocean that they can rely on, especially the mom calves. They come back and they'll nurse and rear their calves in particular places within the calving area. And also, even where they feed, there's work now that scientists are doing to show that individual whales and their family line will prefer certain areas to feed. And so this is the kind of work that they're doing, that sort of granular work, looking at the lives of these individual whales, and especially Punctuation, the grandmother that died while we were filming, and the necropsy that they performed in Cape Breton. All of the researchers there knew that whale for many years, for almost 30 years, while they've been photographing and documenting her life. And so it really surprised me when I spoke to them, and then working with them in making this film, I understood and started to feel the same connection to individuals that they do. And so, in the way that we tell the film, having individual whales that we follow and seeing their work with them, I'm hoping that people can start to understand that connection as well.
No, and I mean, you're absolutely right. There are some moments in the film that really highlight that very poignantly. And I mean, I got to imagine for you as a storyteller, like when you're in the process, you don't always know if you've got a movie yet or not. I've got to imagine, like, were those the moments where you really saw these personal moments happening between these people and the whales? Is that when you knew you had a film?
Absolutely. It was a very difficult film to make because of the access issues I was describing earlier, just getting close enough to these whales to actually film them in a way that's meaningful for an audience. And also in documentary, you never really know what's going to happen. I mean, these are observational films. So in many ways, we're at the mercy of events and how
Right.
things unfold. And certainly the pandemic was not expected when we started this. And
Yeah.
that really threw a curveball in our filming. And it actually lengthened the production window by almost a year. But by doing that, we were able to follow the lives of Snow Cone and her calf. And both of them are impacted by the two main threats for these whales, which is vessel strikes and fishing gear entanglement. So we found our story as things evolved for both the people and the whales. And it's difficult because there are many days we spent on the water where we didn't see any whales.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Less than 400 individuals over a very large expanse of the Atlantic, the North Atlantic Ocean. So it's not guaranteed what you're going to get. And in fact, many of the funders that we approached about the film had that concern. And so it was touch and go for a while, but as things started to happen, and sometimes difficult things. I mean, you'll see in the end of the film that, one of the whales, a young male, 5 years old, was entangled, and we came across that entanglement just within hours of it occurring. And so the footage that we had there and the scientists' reaction to that situation is something that we never intended on filming. And in fact, you'll hear one of the scientists, Moira Brown, who's been doing this for 30 years, disentangling whales and seeing entangled whales. She had never seen a case like that. And so your story evolves and you follow it. And sometimes it's luck, but persistence and being in the field and spending time with your subject matter and the people, your collaborators, really the participants in the film, is the way that it comes together.
It really is the proverbial needle in the haystack sometimes, especially when you're exploring an expanse as big as the Atlantic Ocean.
Absolutely.
Now, I mean, I'm curious for you, ultimately, what made you want to be a storyteller, and what is it about sort of the documentary form that sort of draws you into it as a mode of telling those stories?
I think I focus on observational film is really what I've done, observational documentaries, so unfolding events, and usually focused on unique access to a story. And so certainly getting with these scientists is unique access. But in other ways, I documented, the Red Cross response to the earthquake in Haiti in 2010. And that was access that I had negotiated with their emergency response teams, for years, and then waited for 6 months for a response to happen that was large enough that would demonstrate the sort of humanitarian response to a situation that we wanted the film to be about. And so for me, it's always been about allowing people into a world that they don't normally see or don't know much about, and allowing them to see things unfold as people who live those lives see it. And so it's a very unique opportunity to have that perspective and hopefully change their ideas about something that we often hear about, because what's happening with North Atlantic right whales has been reported in the Canadian press and the US press almost daily for the last 3 years since these deaths occurred in 2017. But I don't think people really understand what it means for a whale to be entangled. Even when they see images of disentanglement teams, because sometimes those are on YouTube, or they'll see images of a whale entangled that might have been entangled for weeks or months, and they've sort of learned to live with that entanglement in some way as best they can. On the average, they survive 6 weeks with an entanglement. No, sorry, excuse me. On average, they survive 6 months with a critical entanglement before they die. So a lot of the photos that we have are whales that have been entangled for a while and they've learned to live with it. But when you see what happens to a whale just hours after it's become entangled and their reaction to that, and how agitated and disturbed and hurt they are, then I think it changes perspectives. And so that's what draws me to the documentary form. It's that you can bring people inside worlds that they don't normally have access to, and they can actually experience something in a way that's impossible to do, either by, consuming news, even television news, like short news reports. It just doesn't give you the same immersion. Books can't do it. Music can't do it. But in a way that film form, the documentary form, allows you to give people that access.
No, and I mean, I think you've done that here because, I mean, we've seen stories and read news and even seen other films about sort of issues surrounding various whale populations. But I mean, these entanglements, I mean, no living creature should have to sort of learn to live with it, quote unquote, because it, like some of the footage you caught is just really allows us as audience members to understand sort of the genuine plight that there is. Because I mean, we can read numbers and see statistics, but until you see it, you don't know. And I mean, I think you've really captured something here that'll spark a lot of conversation. And I mean, I hope in a positive way and hopefully help in some way. And I just, I want to say thank you for the time and thank you for the work and thank you for the film.
Thank you very much, David. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch and to talk about it with me.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.